I am so excited to introduce you to one of the tools in my recovery toolbox, Drink, the intimate relationship between women and alcohol, written by Dowsett Johnston. It's an amazing book that if you don't already have in your library, you've got to go out and get it. And Anne's going to go into her story as well with us and answer a few questions. So tuck in and enjoy this conversation.
Here, we want to show you what's possible in the world of sobriety. We introduce you to the various tools, programs, and resources available, because there are way more options than you may even realize. We want you to find the one that works for you.
And we do it through people who share their pathway to recovery and will help you find your path to freedom. Because getting sober can feel hard enough. You don't have to do it alone. I'm Sarah Roberts.
And I'm Roger DeVoe, and this is Sobriety Starts Here.
Dowsett Johnston, this is an honor and a privilege to be sitting down talking with you. You are a friend, you are a mentor. I am thrilled to have this opportunity to have a really good conversation about your story, about women and alcohol, and of course about your groundbreaking work, Drink. So I want to talk about all of those things. So welcome, Anne. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's a privilege and an honor to be with you too, Sarah. So great to see you.
I just love you. Oh my goodness, we could go on all day, I think. I want to get right into it, Anne. Why did you write the book, Drink?
Oh my goodness. I wrote the book Drink for 3 reasons. When I had a drinking problem, I turned to a book, and it was Carolyn Knapp's Drinking a Love Story. And I read it secretly over the years, year after year, and it's got a little quiz in it, and I did the quiz over and over to see if I was an alcoholic. I wanted to write a book that was that kind of book for a broader number of women to use as their secret friend when they thought they were in trouble, long before they could speak to a friend or they could speak to, maybe their partner, their children. I wanted my book to be their secret book, and it looks like that's been true. I wanted to write the book to look at the closing gender gap on risky drinking, which is an international phenomenon. Women are catching up to men. I really wanted to take a hard look at that. And I wanted to look at why. Why are women drinking more than they ever have? What is promoting and causing this to be a reality as we know it is? And I wanted to talk about that as well.
Brilliant. So that, naturally leads me to the next question, which is, who is this book written for? And I mean, I know it's written for everybody, but really it's for women who are maybe like you were, taking that moment to sit back and think, is there a problem here? Am I drinking in a way that isn't what society deems normal?
Right.
And, right. So yeah, that's who it's for.
It's for the woman who knows secretly that she has a problem. She may have told her journal. She may be journaling about it. And a very common thing, which I did, is to keep a drinking diary, to start writing down in the morning what you think you'll drink that night and see if you can keep your promises. And of course, if you can't keep your promises, then you're in trouble. And I couldn't near the end. So it's for that woman who's got that deep sinking feeling when she wakes up every morning thinking, oh my God, what did I drink? Why did I do it again? And why am I being told by the culture that it's actually sophisticated? It's the way that we relax, we reward, we celebrate. And no one ever takes a hard look at the runny mascara or the terrible stomach the next morning.
What a beautiful way to put it. And it's amazing because when I first picked up your book, right away I was connected to you because Carolyn Knapp's book was the first one I read. And I read it after I was sober for about a year. And she was the first voice that I ever heard that sounded somewhat like mine. So I know for you as a writer, as a journalist, obviously you truly connected with her. I was not writing at the time, but when I finally heard a woman talking about drinking coming from an upper middle class family like I did, and so I felt finally like there's someone else out there that's like me, that I'm not alone. And you mention the words "not alone" a few times in your book, and every time you do, I circled them with great fervor because it connected with me so strongly, because for so long I was mired in shame with my own addiction. And so you wrote the book for me for sure. And I am truly grateful for the work that you've done in the world. This book is amazing. It's a masterpiece. It's something that I think everybody should read, but certainly to those women who, like you say, might be secretly journaling or quietly telling, asking themselves the questions. I was certainly somebody who didn't write down my drinking behavior, but there were those moments where it was, this is not normal. This is not healthy. There is something wrong with this, but I don't know how to change it, and I don't know what to do about it. And I just kept going. What I really love about your story too is that, you became a problem drinker on a couple of glasses of wine each evening. And so many women out there enjoy a couple of glasses of wine every night, and they think that it's normal. They think that it's just part of what they deserve as a busy mom. We're seeing so many of these memes and all of these comments and videos and all sorts of things going on in the culture right now that are condoning this behavior, that it is the reward. And that's why your book is so powerful, because it really takes a stand against the culture and how we are pushing women towards drinking. Because you talk about it in depth in the book, that we advertisers and marketers, they saw this opportunity with women that they hadn't really explored before, and it's now being incredibly exploited. And so that's another part of why your book is just so groundbreaking.
Thank you. Well, it really was an interesting social experiment back in the mid-1990s when the alcohol marketers saw that the Johnny Walker drinkers were all dying out, and they were mostly men. And they looked around the world and did market segmentation and said, where are we going to find the new drinkers? And they saw a whole gender was underperforming. So you've got skinny girl cocktails, and you've got mummy juice, and you've got, even in the United States, happy bitch wine, French rabbit, all these wines that are not manly drinks. They're focused on us. And we have totally bought, I think, certainly if you're a mother, the notion that to survive parenting, you deserve wine to just plain get through it. I mean, we've all seen the memes. So we've got a real revolution happening. And at the same time, we have a whole group of women, you and me among them, fighting back and saying, let's call a spade a spade. When my book came out in 2013, it was ahead of the curve. It was ahead on talking about this. And in fact, many people said that can't possibly be true. And of course, we know it is true.
That's incredible. So who were these people that were pushing back, saying that it wasn't true?
When I sold my series in the Toronto Star, which is Canada's biggest newspaper on women and alcohol, there were many people saying that can't be true. Women cannot be drinking like this. You must be talking about Indigenous women. You cannot be talking about white, middle class, upper class women. And I said, no, in fact, I'm the poster girl. I was the poster girl. I am the poster girl for high functioning, high professional, highly accomplished. I didn't miss work. I won awards at work, and yet my drinking was the dial was being turned up.
And that's why I find, I really wanted to sit down and have this conversation with you, because I get messages regularly from women saying, how do I know if I have a problem?
Right.
I drink like all of the rest of my friends.
Right.
We're all doing it together. The culture is, selling it to me. It's something that everybody tells us is, sophisticated, like you said, and we romanticize it. And yet, I'm waking up in the middle of the night, thirsty, uncomfortable, guilty, shameful. I'm, not performing as well, maybe at work. I'm feeling foggy headed, and I'm thinking maybe I'm using this in ways that aren't healthy, but I'm not on the street corner with a paper bag. And we still tend to go to that image when we hear the word alcoholic or alcohol use disorder. We just don't understand that it's among us and it's all around us, and it's up to us to continue to open up the dialogue and to let people know that you don't have to hit this so-called rock bottom to change your life and to take a harder look at it and to decide whether or not it's serving you or whether it's really hurting your progress and your health and happiness in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I tried to do in the book was talk about the very, very real truth, which is that most women are doing what I did, which is to medicate, self medicate, either stress or burnout or anxiety or depression or all of the above. My drinking was fine for my 20s and my 30s and my 40s, and it wasn't until I hit a very big job as vice principal of arguably Canada's largest university and most reputable university, and I found myself getting into trouble. And, you know, numbing is a very good question. Are you drinking to numb? I don't have a week when I don't hear from readers around the world, New Zealand, London, England, talking to me about how my book helped them and how my book made them think about what they were doing and feel not alone. And so often it's a problem with depression, very, very often. When I did those first early interviews, though, I asked most women if they would be happier being called an alcoholic or a depressive, and all women said I would rather be called a depressive. So there's huge stigma around getting into trouble with alcohol. And really, culturally, what we're talking about today, Sarah, is the notion that you are supposed to be fine with drinking. You're supposed to know how to drink. If you can't drink properly, you're that one weirdo in the group, in your book club, who drinks more than they should. And so in my case, what I would do is I would drink what everybody else drank, and then I would go home, and this is very common for women, and isolate and drink alone. Open another bottle of wine and have another glass of wine myself. So that's very common behavior. I'm trying with my book, and I hope I've met the mark, is to normalize that kind of behavior, the behavior that many of us have gone through when we got in trouble.
Absolutely perfectly put. So true. I think that's what so many of us are doing. That's my story as well. I would drink normally with my friends to the point where when I, revealed that I had a problem, it was, no, you don't. I mean, we all drink together. No one wanted to believe me. And it was like, yeah,
That's
guys,
right.
but I'm going home after you're done and you're going home to, your husband's or bed or whatever. And I'm staying up another 2 or 3 hours and continuing to drink. So we started getting into your story. That's where I'd love to lead this conversation now. You shared about depression, and I think that is depression and anxiety are such huge triggers for people, reasons why people drink. Let's get into your story. Let's talk about your upbringing a little bit, and then into the rest of your life.
Okay. I'm the eldest of three kids of a very, very beautiful woman, my mother, who unfortunately was your poster girl for her era, the classic Betty Ford drinker who drank during the day and mixed Valium. And so many women in the 60s were given Valium and mixed it with cocktails. A stay at home mom who really devolved through her drinking over a number of decades. And so when I wrote this book, I really felt I know this story. I've known it since I was 3. And it's something that I focused on all through my adolescence and said, I will never go there. And in fact, I didn't go there for a long, long time. And I was like my father, which was I was a workaholic. I was a highly functioning journalist who adored her work, who had a fabulous career in journalism in Maclean's magazine for almost 3 decades, a wonderful time. I loved my profession and I worked very, very, very hard. Depression dogged me though from the time I was a teenager. And because my mother had been addicted to Valium, I really wouldn't touch anything for the depression. I wouldn't touch antidepressants. I would try and walk it off. So I had a beautiful life with a beautiful son and a beautiful career, and yes, a marriage breakdown, but I was fine for most of that time. And then menopause hit, the big you know, unsayable word. Menopause hit, a depression that wouldn't budge. And I began to drink a little more to medicate it. And I was still fine until I headed to Montreal to my big job at McGill University. And then I had an amazingly high number of staff, 190 staff in the unit I was running, a job supposedly to raise $89 million in 1 year for McGill University. We raised 100. We worked hard. And I began to medicate exhaustion. I began to medicate loneliness. I began to certainly medicate depression. And I knew I was in trouble. And it was in that job, during that job, I knew I needed to get help and went to rehab.
Wow. So you, so I almost want to backtrack just a little bit. So when you first experienced depression, did you see anybody, did you see a therapist or a doctor or somebody that prescribed you medication, or did you just try to manage it on your own?
For a long, long time, I tried to manage it on my own. I went to my GP. My GP said, walk more and drink more water. I said, I'm drinking too much. And she said, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Really wrong. Wrong answer.
Wow.
And so flash forward, I went to AA and couldn't say I was an alcoholic, and an old timer told me to leave. And I left, and I didn't go back for a long time. So ultimately, I went to the doctor. I got antidepressants. They kicked in. But by that time, my depression was very, very deep. And my workaholism was very, very evolved. And I was like so many other women who you see definitely in the legal field, in the medical field. I've talked to female doctors specialists who've told me they have exactly the same story. And you have the perfect storm where you're raising teenagers, you have ill parents, you're in the sandwich generation. You race home from work, you know you have more work to do after dinner, you have dinner to put on the table, probably homework to oversee, and it's a much easier thing to pour a glass of wine than to get to a yoga class or even to get to your doctor and say, something's really wrong with this picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did the easiest thing for a long time, and I was still fine until I wasn't, until the 2 glasses of wine turned into 3. And then I was not okay. And when the 3 glasses turned into 4, I was really not okay. So
were you, when you talked earlier about journaling, were you tracking your drinking behavior when it was only 2 glasses of wine, and then or did you only just start tracking the wine as it clearly became a problem?
I was tracking the 2 glasses of wine because I could see it was nightly and it was more on the weekends. And I thought, this is just not right. I'm headed, the specter of following in my mother's footsteps was so scary for me. And I knew for my body size and for my history that it just wasn't okay. And then when it got higher on holidays, higher on weekends, I knew really I was in trouble. I was working in a high stress job. Often on Friday nights, we wouldn't go home from Maclean's magazine until 4 in the morning. I would be exhausted. I was, a single mom, and I just knew that I wasn't getting the balance right.
Mm-hmm.
I was just not getting the balance right. And so, I remember when I first entered a 12-step mutual support group, people would say, you didn't drink enough to be an alcoholic. You didn't drink 2 bottles of wine at night. No, I didn't. I was an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
I am an alcoholic.
So you do use the label alcoholic. That's something that fits you?
It's funny, I should have just used it because I'm moving away from it. I am moving away from it because I'm now in my 10th year of recovery, and I really feel it doesn't define me. And sometimes if I go to a meeting, and it's rare, I will sit there and say, I'm a writer, I'm a mother, I'm an alcoholic. I'm a woman in recovery. I'm playing around with it these days because I believe my body hears the message, and my body isn't sitting as well with the message. It's a very political and big question. We could talk all day about that one.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. And it's amazing. I feel like, no wonder you're a mentor for me, because I feel like I just sort of follow you along. We talked about Caroline Knapp being, influential, and then the work that you do. But it's funny because I was very strong about feeling that I want to call a spade a spade. I'm an alcoholic. That's just the way it is. And I felt empowered by the label because I had resisted it for so long. When I I first got sober, I was so ashamed of being an alcoholic that I refused to use the label. And I just told I lied about it. I just told everyone that I quit drinking because I wanted to get healthy. And I started getting healthy to prove that clearly that's what I was doing. But it was just about lying and hiding it. And now it's funny. And then I decided I wanted to embrace it. I wanted to own it. And it was the truth. And I was no longer wanting to hide from it. And like you, I got sober 16 years ago. I relapsed 4 years in. So I'm about, 11, 12 years or whatever now. I really don't count time. I know that's important for a lot of people. It's not for me, but however long it's been. And I feel like, I'm the same as you. I read a lot of people's work, and, so many people are talking about this idea that you don't need to wear these labels anymore. And I'm preferring in recovery, I'm sober, saying I'm an alcoholic. I was just traveling not long ago and watching people get very drunk on vacation, falling down, doing silly things, spilling drinks, and I'm the alcoholic. Like, to me, it just doesn't fit as well as it used to. But for a time, it served me. And I think that that's what's really beautiful about the journey of being in recovery, is that we are allowed to change. We are allowed to evolve, and we are allowed to grow. And something might fit at some point and it might not at another, and that's all okay. But that's what sort of, Glennon talks about. That's what's so precarious about words. I use those words in my writing, and then I go back to those words and I think, wait, that's not how I feel anymore. But it is how I felt at the time. So I think it's all honoring the journey. So I wanted to ask, your father was also an alcoholic. And so how, I know that there's a lot of research in your book and out there that children of two parents who are alcoholics or who have alcohol use disorder are, 50% more, they have a 50% chance of having a problem with alcohol. How was your relationship with your father throughout your life?
My father he was a mining engineer. He was almost always on another continent. So what really made the story with my mother so dire and difficult is that I was the eldest. My father would be in Australia or Africa, and we would be alone with my mom here in Canada. And there wasn't another parent to turn to. Late in his life, absolutely late in his brilliant career, my father retired and joined my mother. And actually, he's the one that died of Korsakoff, which is the most extreme form of alcoholism. I nursed him through that. I made peace with my mom before she died. We traveled together. I had an amazing time in my recovery, nursing my dad, very tragic, and being with my mother after his death. And, really witnessing the healing that was happening in my own life. My son, Nicholas, played a huge role in my getting sober. He gave me a card on Mother's Day one year, a really beautiful hand-painted card saying "Portrait of a Happy Mother." And the portrait of the happy mother was, I thought, how gorgeous. I love this card. And then I read the fine print, and it said she's drinking Perrier, not wine. She doesn't have bloodshot eyes. So it was a wake-up call. And I owe my sobriety in many ways to him. He basically blew the whistle. And unlike in our family, when we tried to blow the whistle on my mother, I listened and went to rehab, got sober. So I owe a lot to him. And ultimately, we had a huge, wonderful family unit. But yes, I did lose my dad to alcohol. It was tragic.
Mm-hmm. So you touched on going to an AA meeting early on, and then you were asked to leave because you weren't enough of an alcoholic. So what then happened that you then decided to go to treatment?
When I was about 17 months into that big job at McGill University, both my partner, my best friend, and as I said, my son, spoke to me about my drinking. And instead of denying it and saying, you're wrong, I decided to go to treatment. And on that decision, my best friend gave me my sobriety bracelet. I'll hold up my wrist, which says never, never, never give up. A really prized possession. Unfortunately, it's easy to stay sober in treatment. It's not so easy to stay sober in your real life. I slipped, as I say. I always think slip as a word person. Slip is such an innocuous word for what we really mean, which is I had terrible problems staying sober for the first 6 months. I got on my knees one day and said, I want to take my life. If I can't live sober, it's no way to live. And I went to a meeting, met a really fantastic woman that day, and haven't had a drink since. So I will say that AA played a huge part in my early recovery. And for a significant part of my early recovery, because my depression didn't budge right away. And I had a really difficult time in the first 18 months. And then when I was 18 months sober, the man I was to marry, whom I've been with for 14 years, broke up with me. And my whole life opened wide, like a landscape I'd never seen before. I was depressed. I was now not with my partner. I was unemployed. And that's when I began writing about women and drinking, and eventually it came to writing Drink, which is an international bestseller. So, but it was a terribly difficult time. I lost my dad and my partner within 6 months, really two big men in my life. And my third man, my young son, moved to the US. So really all the men vacated. Early recovery, early sobriety is not for the faint of heart, as you know, Sarah. It's not for the faint of heart, and you really need to learn about self-care and a new way of living. It's a real phoenix process. And I was a phoenix, and it took a long time to get it right.
I love that you use the term phoenix. It's funny, whenever I'll have to create things like names, if we're playing trivia, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I always since I've been about 17 years old, I've always used the name Phoenix, and it never really came together until not long ago. I said to Roger one day, I don't know why I ever picked that up, but anytime, like, we played laser tag and you have to pick a name and it's Phoenix, and he's like, why Phoenix? And I said, I don't know, I just always do that. But it's so true. What a great way of putting it. We really do rise from the ashes, and it's that feeling that you really do, no matter where your drinking has led you. And although you don't need to hit these so-called rock bottoms of losing absolutely everything, there is a bottom. There is a letting go and an allowing away of the old life to create the new. But it is the most painful process. It is not for the faint of heart. You're absolutely right. And thank God that you were able to take what you learned from that experience and put it into something that's serving so many people. Your book has saved lives, and I know that's true. And I mean, imagine the countless people out there who have read it that you'll never hear from, that you never will know that you've touched. But imagine the number of people out there in the world that have been saved because of your work, because they can see themselves in your words.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much.
It's huge. What you're doing is changing lives. So I want people to continue to connect with you. Tell us, what is the best way if people want to get a copy of the book Drink? Where can they find it, and how can they find you if they want to go further with you?
You can find the book Drink anywhere. It's for sale all around the world. Amazon, Indigo, look for it anywhere, you'll find it. Connecting with me is easy. My name, and DowsettJohnston.com, and it's easy to find a way to contact me. And I answer all my emails as soon as I get them, and I love that part of my day. It's a really high point for me to be able to write to those who care enough to talk to me about my book
and
beautiful. Their recovery.
Absolutely. And that's it. Creating that kind of community around recovery is what this is all about, and why Sobriety Starts Here is something that my partner and I have created, just because we want to help people to know that you are not alone. We are not alone in this. There are so many other people who have gone through the struggles that we're going through. And what I truly do mean about loving your story so much is that we can look at it and say, this high functioning, highly productive, highly respected woman in these powerful positions can still be taken down by this drug. And the notion that because it's legal, it's okay, because it's socially acceptable, it's okay. This is what we are trying to break the barriers down about, because too many women are dying, too many people are dying, and not just literally, but figuratively as well. Relationships are being ruined, and we are we're just stealing from ourselves when we don't nurture and nourish what we were put on this planet to do. None of us were supposed to be sitting alone at night, drinking to pass out, to just get through. We are supposed to thrive in this thing called life, not just endure it. So thank you for showing us how we can do that, even though there are struggles. There are things that we have to go through. I mean, you battled depression, anxiety, you were suicidal at times in your life, and yet look at you now. Look at what you're able to do with all of that. It doesn't have to define you. And that's what I just love so much about you and your story. I admire you and honor you. And thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me.
You're just a gem. Thank you.
Thanks a million.
So now what I would love to do is just ask a couple of questions. We're going to use these sort of, we're probably going to use them as not blooper reel, but kind of that idea where we're just going to ask some rapid fire questions. I think I just have 3 of them. And so I'd love you to just answer the next following questions. Tell me, what is the best thing about being sober?
The best thing about being sober is climbing into bed at night, not passing out, not, finding myself in a blackout, being able to look at the stars. That's the thing I love the most. I stand by my window, I can see the stars, I can read my book, I can say my prayers, I can do a little meditation, and that is such a precious part of my time. That's number 1, and waking up in the morning with no guilt. Waking up in the morning with my journal, writing, no guilt.
No guilt. Oh my gosh. Isn't that heavenly?
Heavenly.
No guilt. Not having said things you regret, not having to reread texts you sent and pray that they haven't been read or maybe somehow will get deleted, which they don't. And all of that. Oh my gosh.
Tiptoe to the kitchen and look in the fridge and figure out how much you really drank.
Yeah.
That's also a scary one. None of that. So that's number 1.
And for me, I remember looking out my apartment window to see if my car was there to make sure that I had gotten it home. I drove drunk a lot. Not something that I am proud of at all. What is your favorite swear word?
My favorite swear word. What a great question. I'm known for saying old-fashioned things like jeepers, holy cow, and my son, who's 33, thinks I'm a throwback and an oddity.
I love it. We'll accept those. What do you know for sure?
I know for sure that there are many chapters to my life ahead. I've just decided to become a psychotherapist, and I've just been accepted into the school of my dreams. And I know that as wild as my imagination is, and it is a pretty wild imagination, it's not as great as the universe is. And many, many surprises are in front of me. That's what I know for sure.
That's beautiful. I want you to share, what are your favorite tools in your recovery toolbox? I think that's always such an important gift to give people, because sometimes we don't even think of these, little things that we do on a daily basis that support our recovery. I'd love to know what some of those are for you.
For sure, sleep. And I'm a terrible sleeper, but I'm a better sleeper than when I was drinking. So for sure, sleep. I get up at 4 in the morning every morning, and I just start my writing, and that is precious. So it keeps me in touch with my my wonderful ability to imagine and think. So sleep, and early mornings, I nap. I do the Mediterranean siesta.
Can I ask, how long do you nap for? Because I'm a big fan of naps. I help, what I do in my career. And so I help people with their health. And for people that can't get that 8 hours of sleep, or even people that can, I recommend, a certain specific amount of time so that you don't feel groggy afterwards. But I'm curious, how long do you like to have a nap for in the afternoon?
Short. I keep it short.
Yes.
I keep it short. I make sure that it's not going to affect, my night's sleep as much as possible. So that would be in my toolbox for sure. Connection. I see a lot of people. I live alone. I'm a single woman, and I make sure that I see a lot of people. I'm out I'm obviously in the creative arts. I'm interested in theater and film. In my friends, I have a great community, and I treasure it.
It's so key. I think that so many of us isolate. And what I'm hearing is, I imagine most of your friends sober?
No,
Yeah, that's what I felt, that that was the truth. And
no, most of my friends are in the creative arts. I'm a very rare person in that group. I certainly have my Serenity sisters, as I call them, my sober friends. But no, the majority of my friends are not sober, and they have no problem with alcohol. And I'm seen as the one, oddity, and they're very tender towards me.
you don't, and how long was it before you found that you could enjoy their company and be around alcohol without it bothering you or triggering you?
I had a lot of trouble the first 18 months. I really did.
Mhm.
I still have trouble at two occasions. When the champagne comes out at weddings, I have trouble, and I have trouble on New Year's Eve when the champagne comes out still. Those are my two things, and the only great blessing of being in my 10th year of sobriety is I know that. So I make sure that I'm well prepared, cushioned for it, and do my best to accommodate it in any way that I can. But yeah, those are tough, but the rest of it's fine.
That's so key, isn't it? That we really, we talk a lot. I know that people, I didn't use AA as my pathway to recovery, but the people that I speak to that did, they talk a lot about time. And as much as I don't put a lot of emphasis on time in my life, I've been sober a long time now, but I feel like it's so important to get that traction, because until you can string some time together, it's just, we are pulled back. Those neural pathways in our brains just keep pulling us backwards to where we were comfortable and to what we knew. And it's so much easier to go that way than to carve out a new path. And so I really think that's key, that if you can just get some solid footing, and you talk about 18 months, I mean, that's a long time to go feeling angsty and feeling anxious and feeling triggery. I mean, holy cow, how did you get through those first 18 months? What really helped you get that solid footing?
An addiction doctor told me that a craving was basically like a labor pain. It came, it arrived, and it left. And I began to surf the cravings, really understanding that they would pass, and that if I could distract myself, I did practice HALT, never be too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And in my case, you could add grief stricken, because I had a lot of heartache, given what happened with my father and my sweetheart. So I think you use all your tools. You use all your tools, every tool. And luckily, I'm an extrovert. So I was very happy to tell other people, look, I'm having trouble right now. Walk into a restaurant and have the seat that faces the wall of wine. I'd say, can we switch seats? I'd love to sit on the other side. Little things like that. Just always being very aware that you didn't want to be swamped or overwhelmed.
I really respect those choices. And I think that's so key, is that you're always looking for ways that you can keep the goal in mind, which is, I've decided I want to be sober. And as much as it's uncomfortable in each of these moments, I'm going to keep the eye on the prize. I'm going to keep reminding myself. And I love HALT. I talk about that in my book as well. Whenever we're craving sugar, it's the same thing. It's all the same stuff anyway. So that's brilliant. I love it. Thank you for all of that. Truly, I am honored to have had this chance to chat with you. Was there anything else that you wanted to share?
I just want to say congratulations on starting this new series. I'm so proud of you. I'm so honored to be on it. And I wish you every success, you and Roger.
I think you are amazing. I love you dearly. I mean it, that you are always in my heart. I carry you with me all the time. There are so many moments where I'll think of you, or where you'll pop into my mind whenever I drive down. This is going to make me cry. I don't even know why, but I drive downtown and I pass the Shore Club and I think of our meeting there. And I just, I really appreciate having you in my life.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Ditto, ditto. And I'm sugar free. So there you go.
Awesome. Congratulations. Amazing. Well, I mean, again, all of those same tools that we can use to stay sober. It's the same thing when we're craving sugar, right? It's like it's the same surfing those cravings. It's the same deal. We have to do it no matter what it is. If it's pornography or shopping, there are times I'll go to the mall and I want everything. And it's like, I don't need everything. I'm just going to surf that moment, and I'm going to come here for what I came for, and I'm going to go home. So, so brilliantly done. Thank you for all of this. Enjoy your appointment today. I'm so glad that we were able to get this in, and that you still get your chance to go and see your therapist. And amazing on you becoming a psychotherapist. I can't wait for 2 years from now when you are out in the world doing that work, and just keep being amazing. You're just awesome.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you,
Bye.
man.
Bye,
Bye. Love you.
Roger.
Bye.
Bye.
Take